Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. Sometimes, the people we love the most end up being the ones who hurt us the deepest. This is the story of a father who only wanted to see his daughter walk down the aisle, but instead, he was told to leave her wedding. What followed wasn't just heartbreak, it was a journey through pain, forgiveness, and the silent power of a parent's love. So, close your eyes, relax, and let me take you on this emotional journey, a story of love, loss, and redemption. I still remember the morning I found out about my daughter's wedding, not from her, but from a neighbor's whispered conversation over the fence. It was one of those slow Sundays when the world feels half asleep, and even the birds seem to sing softer. Mrs. D'Souza, my elderly neighbor, leaned over and said, "Oh, Mr. Harris, you must be so proud. Your daughter's getting married next month. Such wonderful news." For a moment, I thought she must be mistaken. My daughter, Clara, getting married? She hadn't said a word to me. I laughed it off politely, pretending I already knew, but my hands trembled as I went back inside. The walls of my small apartment suddenly felt tighter, the air heavier. It had been 5 years since Clara had spoken to me properly. After her mother passed away, grief twisted our relationship into something unrecognizable. She blamed me for moving on too fast, for remarrying, though even that marriage didn't last long. I had tried, God knows I had tried, to mend things. But every call, every message, every visit ended in silence. And now, her wedding. That afternoon, I sat in my old armchair staring at a faded photograph. Clara at 6 years old, her hair tied in 2 messy ponytails, her small hands covered in paint from the art project we'd done together. "You're my hero, Daddy," she'd said back then. I smiled bitterly. When did I stop being that? For days, I debated whether to confront her or not. Maybe she had meant to invite me, but life got in the way. Or maybe she just didn't want me there. The thought stabbed deeper than I expected. Finally, I decided I couldn't stay away. A father shouldn't need an invitation to his daughter's wedding. I went to the local store, bought a simple navy blue suit, nothing fancy, but clean, respectable. The kind of suit that says, "I'm trying." I even picked up a small gift, a silver locket engraved with her initials. Inside, I placed 2 tiny photos, one of her mother and one of little Clara on her first day of school. The wedding day arrived bright and beautiful. I drove 2 hours to reach the elegant countryside venue, a sprawling estate with white chairs, flower arches, and laughter in the air. Guests in bright dresses and sharp suits floated past me, all smiles and greetings. No one knew who I was, just an older man holding a small box and a heart full of hope. As I approached the reception tent, I spotted her. My little girl, now a grown woman, radiant in her ivory gown. Her laughter carried through the air like a melody I'd once known by heart. She looked happy. Truly happy. My throat tightened. For a long moment, I just watched from a distance. Maybe that was enough, to see her happy, even if I wasn't part of it. But then one of the ushers noticed me. "Sir, may I help you? Are you with the groom's side or the bride's?" I smiled nervously. "The bride's. Her father." The usher's polite smile faltered for just a second before he said, "Oh, of course, sir. Right this way." He led me closer to the tent, where Clara was surrounded by friends and relatives. My steps slowed as my heart pounded. When she turned and our eyes met, her smile froze. "Dad?" she said, barely above a whisper. Then, more sharply, "What are you doing here?" Every conversation nearby seemed to stop. The laughter died down. I swallowed hard and held out the gift box. I came to see you, Clara. To wish you happiness. I didn't get an invitation, but... Her expression darkened. You weren't supposed to. The words hit harder than I imagined. Clara, please. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just wanted to see my daughter on her wedding day. Just once. Her fiancé, a tall, polished man I'd never met, placed a hand on her shoulder protectively. Clara, is everything all right? She didn't take her eyes off me. Dad, please. Not today. This is my day. You've had your chances, birthdays, graduations, everything. You were never there when it mattered. Now it's too late. My lips parted, but no sound came out. The murmurs of the guests surrounded us like a storm. My hands trembled, still holding the tiny box that suddenly felt far too heavy. Clara, I said quietly, I know I made mistakes. I know I failed you in ways I can't undo. But I've never stopped loving you. She looked down, her jaw tightening. Please, Dad, go home. The usher shifted awkwardly beside me, waiting. My heart sank. Around us, people pretended not to stare. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, the little girl who used to run into my arms after school. But then she turned away. I placed the gift gently on a nearby table and nodded. You look beautiful, I whispered. Just like your mother did. Then I walked away. The laughter and music resumed behind me, like nothing had happened. I reached the car, sat inside, and stared at the steering wheel until my vision blurred. The invitation had never come, but the rejection had. Loud and clear. I started the engine, but I didn't drive home. Not yet. Instead, I sat under an old oak tree near the venue, listening to the faint echo of the wedding band playing in the distance. I wondered if she would ever open the little silver box. Inside, under the photo of her mother, I had written a single line. No matter the distance, a father's love never ends. That night, as the stars blinked above me, I realized something. Maybe this wasn't the end of our story. Maybe, just maybe, this painful day was only the beginning of finding a way back to each other. But for now, I sat alone in the dark, clutching the memory of a daughter who once called me her hero, and praying that someday, she might remember why. The drive back home from Clara's wedding felt longer than it should have. The roads were empty, but my mind was anything but. Every corner, every mile was haunted by the echo of her words, Dad, please. Not today. When I reached my small apartment, I didn't even take off my shoes. I sat by the kitchen table, the same one where I used to help Clara with her homework, and just stared at the single teacup I'd left there that morning. The silence was unbearable. It was strange how the mind worked. In moments of heartbreak, it always brought back memories you tried to bury. The way she used to scribble on my work notes, her laughter when we danced clumsily to the radio, the night she fell asleep on my shoulder after her mother's funeral. I missed her more than I'd ever admit aloud. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out a pen and a blank sheet of paper. No phone calls, no texts, no emails. Just me, my thoughts, and the sound of ink scratching across the page. My dearest Clara, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I'm not sure I'll even send it. But I need to say what I couldn't say at your wedding. Maybe I owe you and myself that much. First, I want you to know that I am proud of you. I saw you in that white dress, and for a moment, I forgot all the distance, all the silence. I only saw my little girl, the same one who once begged me to braid her hair before school and who cried when her goldfish died. You looked happy, truly happy, and that alone filled me with peace. But I also saw something else in your eyes, Clara, pain. The kind that doesn't fade easily. The kind I know I helped create. I know I wasn't there enough. When your mother died, I didn't just lose her, I lost myself. I thought I was protecting you by hiding my grief, by trying to move on. But I realize now that you needed me to feel with you, not just function beside you. You said I wasn't there when it mattered. You're right. Birthdays, your first heartbreak, your college graduation, I should have been there. I should have fought harder to stay connected, no matter how awkward or unwanted it felt. But I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I hope one day you'll understand that sometimes love doesn't look like what we want it to. Sometimes it's quiet, clumsy, and late. But it's still love. If this letter ever reaches you, I just want you to know that my door will always be open. No conditions. No expectations. Just love. Dad. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into an envelope, and wrote her name on it in shaky handwriting, Clara Harris. I didn't have the courage to add her new last name. It felt like a final admission that she belonged to someone else's world now. I placed the letter on the table beside me and just stared at it. Part of me wanted to drive to her house right then and drop it in her mailbox. Another part, the louder, wearier one, whispered that it wouldn't matter. She'd made her choice. Still, that night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing in that wedding dress, her eyes cold but glistening, her lips trembling before she turned away. I got up and wandered around my apartment, stopping by the old bookshelf that held years of dust-covered photo albums. I hadn't opened them in forever. When I finally did, the first page hit me like a wave. That we were, me, Clara, and her mother, at the beach. Clara was maybe 5, laughing as the waves crashed over her tiny feet. Her mother, Emily, had that soft, gentle smile that used to calm every storm. I traced my finger over their faces. "What would you have done, Emily?" I whispered to the empty room. "Would you have hated me too?" The silence didn't answer. The next morning, I made myself a cup of coffee, took the letter, and stepped outside. The world looked calm. Kids heading to school, neighbors watering their plants, life carrying on. But inside, I felt like a ghost wandering through a world that had moved on without me. On my way to the mailbox, I hesitated. Across the street, a father was walking his little girl to school, holding her hand as she skipped beside him. Something in that simple sight broke me. I turned around and went back inside. The letter remained unsent. Days turned into weeks. The wedding faded from the town's gossip cycle, replaced by new stories, new whispers. But inside me, the moment replayed endlessly. Then one afternoon, a knock came at my door. It wasn't Clara. It was an envelope, hand-delivered, addressed to me. My heart raced as I tore it open. Inside was a simple card. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. "I found the box you left at the wedding. I opened it today. I don't know what to say yet. I'm still hurt. But I remembered. I remembered the way Mom used to look at you. The way you looked at her. Maybe one day we can talk. Not today, but someday. Clara." I sat down slowly, clutching the card. The words were short, cautious, but they were something, a crack in the wall. I took the unsent letter from my drawer and looked at it again. For the first time in weeks, I smiled faintly. Maybe it wasn't meant to be sent. Maybe it was meant to be felt. That night, I lit a candle beside the window and placed the letter next to it. I didn't burn it or hide it. I just let it sit there, like a silent promise waiting to be fulfilled. Sometimes healing doesn't come with grand gestures or emotional reunions. Sometimes it starts with a simple note, a quiet moment, and the courage to keep loving despite the distance. And though Clara's words were few, they carried a spark of hope, one I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe the invitation had never come because our story wasn't finished yet. Maybe, just maybe, it was about to begin again. It had been nearly 3 months since Clara's wedding. Life had settled into its quiet rhythm again. Mornings with black coffee, afternoons with the hum of the ceiling fan, and evenings spent staring out the window as the world passed me by. The little card she'd sent me, just a few lines in her careful handwriting, still sat on my mantelpiece. I'd read it so many times that the edges were soft, almost worn away. Maybe one day we can talk. I didn't know when that day would come, or if it ever truly would. But those words had become a thread I held onto in the silence, fragile, but real. And then one cold, rainy afternoon, the knock came. It wasn't loud, just a soft, hesitant tapping, the kind that carries both uncertainty and hope. I almost didn't hear it at first over the rain against the windows. When I opened the door, my breath caught. Clara stood there. She was wearing a pale gray coat, her hair pulled back neatly, raindrops glistening on her cheeks. She looked older than I remembered, not by years, but by experience. By life. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Clara," I finally managed. "You're here." She gave a small, almost nervous smile. "Hi, Dad." Those 2 words, "Hi, Dad," felt like sunlight after a long winter. I stepped aside quickly. Come in. You'll catch a cold out there." She hesitated before stepping over the threshold, her eyes scanning the small apartment. It was tidy. I'd made sure of that just in case. Maybe, deep down, I'd been waiting for this moment all along. I handed her a towel, and she took it with a quiet, "Thanks." She sat down on the old couch, the same one where she used to watch cartoons as a kid, legs swinging over the edge. "I almost didn't come," she said softly. "I've been thinking about it for weeks." "I'm glad you did," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've missed you, Clara." She looked down, rubbing her palms together. "I don't know where to start. Everything's just complicated." "Then start anywhere," I said. "I'll listen." She took a long breath, eyes glistening with something between frustration and sadness. "When Mom died, I was angry. Angry at the world, angry at you. You didn't cry, Dad. Not once. You just kept working, fixing things, pretending everything was fine. And then you remarried. I thought you'd forgotten her. Forgotten us." Her voice cracked. I closed my eyes, guilt pressing down like a weight I'd carried for years. "You're right," I said quietly. "I did keep working. I didn't know what else to do. Losing your mother broke me in ways I couldn't explain. I thought if I stayed busy, I wouldn't fall apart completely." She looked up at me sharply. "But I needed you to fall apart with me, Dad. I needed to know I wasn't the only one who was lost." The truth in her words hit like a wave. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "I should have been there for you, not just in the same house, but with you. I thought I was protecting you by being strong. I see now that what you needed was someone who could be weak with you." Clara wiped her eyes quickly. "I didn't come here to blame you. I just needed to understand." Silence stretched between us for a moment, filled only by the soft drumming of rain outside. Then, to my surprise, she smiled faintly. "I found the letter you wrote." I froze. "The one I didn't send?" She nodded. "Mom used to say you kept everything important in the same drawer by the window. I checked when I came by once, a long time ago." I stared at her, speechless. "You came here?" "Once," she said quietly. "A year after you remarried. I wanted to see you, but when I looked through the window and saw you with her, laughing, I thought you'd replaced us. I turned around and left. My heart broke all over again. Oh, Clara, I whispered. I wasn't replacing you. I was trying to fill an emptiness that never could be filled. You and your mother are the only home I ever had. She took a shaky breath, eyes glistening. When I read your letter, I saw that. For the first time in years, I realized maybe you weren't just the villain I made you out to be. I poured her a cup of tea, the same chamomile her mother used to drink, and handed it to her. She smiled softly as she took it, the steam curling between us like the ghosts of old memories. I didn't expect to see you at the wedding, she said suddenly. When I saw you there, I panicked. If I let you in, all the pain would come back. I wanted my new life to start clean. I nodded slowly. I understand. I shouldn't have shown up without being invited. She shook her head. No, you had every right to be there. I just wasn't ready. Her voice faltered, and then she whispered, I'm sorry for what I said that day. Those words, I'm sorry, hit me harder than anything else. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. She didn't pull away. You have nothing to apologize for, I said. You were honest. I deserve to hear it. We talked for hours after that. About her new job, her husband, her plans for the future. I told her about my garden, my volunteer work at the local library, the quiet things that kept me going. It wasn't the same as before, we didn't laugh as easily, didn't hug right away. But something fragile and beautiful had returned between us. Conversation. As the rain slowed, she stood to leave. I walked her to the door. She paused before stepping out, looking back at me with that same mix of strength and softness her mother used to have. Dad? Yes. Would you like to come over for dinner sometime? Nothing fancy. Just family. My throat tightened. I'd love that. Her lips curved into a real smile, small, but full of warmth. I'll call you. And then she was gone. That night, I sat by the window again, but the silence didn't feel heavy anymore. The letter still rested by the candle, but now it had a new purpose, not as a confession of guilt, but as a symbol of healing. I realized something as the moonlight poured through the glass. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the past, it's about accepting that love can survive it. Clara had knocked on my door that afternoon, but what she truly opened was a doorway back into my life, one I thought had been closed forever. For the first time in years, I went to bed smiling, not because everything was perfect, but because it was beginning to be okay. The city lights flickered through the half-drawn curtains as I adjusted the last candle on the table. My hands trembled slightly, not because I was nervous about cooking, though I'd burnt the first batch of pasta, but because of the strange stillness that filled the apartment. It was the kind of quiet that sits on your chest and refuses to leave. Tonight was supposed to be special. After everything, the missed invitations, the unspoken letters, the unexpected knock at my door, here we were, about to share dinner for the first time in years. Evelyn had said yes. When she arrived, the faint scent of rain followed her in. Her hair was damp, sticking to her cheek, and she looked both exactly the same and completely different. She wore a soft blue dress, the same color she used to wear when we'd go out in college, the same shade I'd once told her made her eyes look like the sky before a storm. You remembered the candles, she said, smiling faintly. Hard to forget, I replied. You used to light them every time I came over, even for takeout. She laughed softly. You always hated that. Said it was too dramatic. I didn't hate it, I said, setting down the wine bottle. I just didn't understand why we needed candles for noodles. Evelyn walked around the small dining area, running her fingers over the back of a chair, the bookshelf, the photo frames that lined the wall. One of them caught her attention. A picture from years ago, when we were both still figuring out who we wanted to be. She picked it up. "We looked happy," she said. "We were," I replied quietly. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was filled with memory, not regret. We sat down to eat. The pasta wasn't perfect. Slightly overcooked, maybe too much garlic, but she didn't complain. She never did. She just twirled it around her fork, smiling softly as if every bite carried a story. Between sips of wine, our conversation tiptoed around the obvious. The years apart, the unsent letters, the night she left. We talked about work, the city, the little things that didn't hurt to mention. Then, like a shadow creeping into the light, her voice softened. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. I didn't have to ask which one. "The night you left?" I said. She nodded. "I thought you'd come after me." "I almost did," I admitted. "But then I found your letter." Her eyes flickered up, startled. "You read it?" "Yes." "Every word." For a moment, she looked away. The candlelight danced across her face, revealing a mix of guilt and relief. "I never meant for you to see it. It wasn't finished." "I know," I said. "But it said enough." We fell quiet again. The air between us was thick with everything we hadn't said for years. I wanted to ask her why she'd left without goodbye. She wanted to ask why I hadn't stopped her. But instead, we talked about how strange it was to feel so familiar and so distant all at once. After dinner, I poured more wine. The city outside hummed, cars passing, laughter echoing from the street below. The world moved on, but inside my apartment, time seemed to pause. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, looking at me the way she used to, the way that made me feel seen and undone all at once. "You haven't changed much," she said. "You have," I replied, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. She was softer now, quieter. Or maybe just tired. She smiled faintly. I had to. There was a story in that sentence, one she wasn't ready to tell. When the clock struck 9, she stood up. "I should go," she said, reaching for her coat. "Stay a little longer," I found myself saying before I could stop. She hesitated, then nodded. We moved to the couch. The rain had picked up again, tapping against the window like fingers drumming a secret rhythm. She tucked her legs beneath her, holding her cup of tea like it was an anchor. "Do you still write?" she asked suddenly. "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly nonsense. Things that never make it past the first page." "You used to write about us," she said softly. "I stopped when you left." She looked down. "Maybe you should start again." I wanted to tell her that she never really left the pages, that every word since had been a shadow of her name. But I didn't. Some truths are better left unsaid, even when they ache to be spoken. Instead, I asked, "Do you still paint?" "Not like I used to," she said. "But sometimes, when I can't sleep, I'll paint the places I miss. Your balcony. The coffee shop on 5th. The old theater." My heart tightened. "You miss those places?" She smiled. "I miss what they meant." We sat in silence again. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that felt like breathing the same memory. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her hand over mine. It was a small gesture, but it carried years of what-ifs and maybes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For leaving without saying goodbye. For thinking you'd know why." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry for not asking you to stay." The world outside blurred. The rain softened. And for a fleeting moment, it felt like time had folded, like we were back in that tiny apartment years ago, before the silence, before the distance. Do you ever think things could have been different? I asked. Evelyn looked at me, her eyes glistening with something like hope and sorrow tangled together. Sometimes, she said, but maybe we had to lose each other to understand what we had. The candles had nearly burned out, their flames flickering low. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against mine, a silent promise or maybe a goodbye. When she finally stood to leave, I didn't stop her this time. But before she walked out, she turned and smiled, a small, wistful smile that carried more weight than words. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "Anytime," I replied. The door closed softly behind her. For a while, I stood there, surrounded by half-empty glasses, cold pasta, and the faint scent of lavender she'd left behind. The silence returned, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. I sat down at the table, pulled out my notebook, and for the first time in years, I began to write. The first line came easily. "Tonight, I had dinner with the ghost of the life I once dreamed of." And just like that, the story continued. The morning light crept in through the blinds, painting soft stripes across the table where the candles had burned down to stubs. The air still carried the faint aroma of garlic, wine, and something sweeter, lavender, maybe. Her scent lingered like a whisper that refused to fade. I hadn't slept much. The night had stretched on endlessly after she left. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing by the door, smiling that bittersweet smile that said, "I remember," and "I'm sorry," all at once. Now, as I sat with a cup of black coffee, the world outside seemed too calm. It felt wrong, as if everything should have changed after last night. But the city kept moving, indifferent as ever. I glanced at the empty chair across from me. The one she had sat in, twirling her fork, laughing softly, talking about the past as though it were someone else's story. The candle beside it had melted into a puddle of wax, a small, perfect ruin. I wondered if she'd slept, if she'd gone home and thought about me the way I thought about her. Or, to her, dinner was just a moment, closure, perhaps. For me, it felt like a door had been cracked open again, letting in both light and ghosts. My phone buzzed. A message. "Evelyn, thank you for last night. I didn't realize how much I missed just talking." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Me, I'm glad you came. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear your voice again." The three dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, another message. "Evelyn, can we meet again? Maybe somewhere quiet. I have something I want to tell you." My heart stuttered. I didn't know if it was hope or fear that made it skip. "Anyone? Evelyn, this evening. The park near the old library? 6 p.m. I typed "sure" and hit send. Then I just sat there, staring at the message, the morning suddenly brighter, sharper. The day passed in a blur. At work, I went through the motions, emails, meetings, phone calls, but my thoughts drifted constantly. Every sound, every phrase seemed to loop back to her. The clinking of a coffee cup reminded me of the way she laughed. The smell of rain on the pavement outside reminded me of her arrival last night. By the time the clock struck 5, I couldn't pretend to focus anymore. I left early, walked through the drizzle toward the park, and arrived 10 minutes before 6. It was quiet there. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and clean. The benches were slick with water, and puddles mirrored the gray sky above. I sat down beneath the old oak tree where we used to meet years ago, back when we were still just us. At exactly 6, I saw her. She walked toward me, holding a folded umbrella, her hair pulled back, a scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. She smiled when she saw me, and just like that, the ache in my chest eased. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she sat beside me. "You look tired," I said. "So do you," she replied with a faint grin. "Didn't sleep?" "Barely." "You?" She shook her head. "I kept thinking about last night. About everything." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the rustle of wet leaves and the distant hum of the city. Then she took a deep breath. "There's something I didn't tell you," she began. "Something I should have said years ago." I turned to her. Her hands were trembling slightly as she clasped them together. "When I left," she said slowly, "it wasn't because I stopped loving you. It was because I was scared." "Scared?" I repeated. She nodded. "You remember that summer, when I got that offer to study abroad?" I nodded. How could I forget? It was the start of everything unraveling. I wanted to take it, but I didn't know how to tell you. You had your job, your plans. I didn't want to make you choose between me and your life here. And when I finally decided to go, I thought it would be easier if I just left. "You thought disappearing would hurt less?" I asked quietly. Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I thought it would hurt you less." I was wrong. The words hung in the air like mist. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to be angry, but the truth was, I'd already spent years being angry. Now I was just tired. "I wrote that letter," she continued, "because I couldn't face you. But halfway through, I realized how much I was running from. That's why it was unfinished. I kept it," I said. "All these years." She looked at me, startled. "You did?" "It's in a box somewhere. I couldn't throw it away." Evelyn smiled faintly, tears spilling over. "You always kept things you shouldn't." "Maybe," I said. "But some things are worth keeping." She laughed softly through her tears, and for a moment, it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Then her face grew serious again. "There's more," she said. "The reason I wanted to see you again now." My chest tightened. "Go on." She hesitated. "I'm leaving again. Next month." The words hit like cold water. "Leaving?" "For good this time," she said. "I got a position overseas. It's a big opportunity. One I can't pass up." I stared at her, trying to find the right words, but my voice caught in my throat. "So this is goodbye?" "Not exactly," she said softly. "I didn't want to leave without seeing you, without making things right." I swallowed hard. "And dinner was part of that?" She nodded. "I needed to remember what it felt like, to sit across from you, to talk, to laugh. To know that maybe we could forgive each other." The park felt suddenly smaller. The rain started again, a light drizzle that clung to our clothes and hair. Neither of us moved. "You could stay," I said finally. The words came out quiet, almost desperate. She looked at me, her eyes full of sadness. "You know I can't." I did. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I wrote you something," she said. "A real letter this time. Finished." She placed it in my hand, her fingers lingering just long enough for me to feel their warmth. "When should I read it?" I asked. "When you're ready," she said. We stood. The rain had turned into a soft mist, blurring the world around us. She looked up at me, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not hating me." I smiled weakly. "Tried. Didn't work. She laughed, the same laugh that used to make everything feel okay, then stepped forward and hugged me. It wasn't the kind of hug that promised more. It was the kind that said this was real and it mattered. And then she walked away. I stood there long after she disappeared into the gray haze of rain, the letter clutched in my hand. That night, back in my apartment, I lit the last candle from the box, the same brand she used to love. I sat at the table where we'd shared dinner and opened the envelope. Her handwriting was still the same, neat, looping, careful. You once told me that some stories don't need an ending, just an understanding. I think ours is one of them. You were my home when I didn't know what that meant. Thank you for teaching me love without conditions. Even if we never find our way back, know that you were never forgotten. Voice. Evelyn. By the time I finished reading, the candle had burned halfway down. The flame flickered, casting her words in soft light. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the silence fill me. Outside, the city was alive, sirens, laughter, footsteps, all blending into one steady hum. Life was moving forward as it always did. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the first one she'd written years ago. Two pieces of the same story, unfinished, but complete in their own way. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lost. Just grateful. Tomorrow would come. The light would change. But tonight, I would let the past rest, gently, like a book closing after the final page. The letter sat on my desk for 3 days before I dared to open it again. I had read it once, carefully, letting each word burn into me like a quiet flame. But every time I looked at the envelope after that, something inside me ached, a strange mix of peace and longing that I couldn't quite name. Her handwriting still haunted me, as if every curve and loop carried her voice. Even now, as sunlight spilled through the window, touching the edge of the paper, I half expected her to walk through the door, smiling that familiar, apologetic smile. But she didn't. She was gone. And this time, she'd meant it. I went about my days pretending things were normal. Evening walks. I smiled at the barista who remembered my order, nodded at neighbors, even managed to laugh at a coworker's joke. But beneath it all, I felt hollow, like someone had quietly scooped something out of me and left only the shell. It wasn't love that hurt. It was absence. On the fourth night, just as the city lights flickered on and the air turned crisp, a knock came at my door. Not the light, uncertain kind. This one was firm, 3 knocks, steady and sure. I hesitated before opening it. A young woman stood there, maybe in her late 20s, holding a small brown parcel. Her eyes were wide and tired, her clothes simple. "Are you Mr. Collins?" she asked. "Yes." She looked relieved. "I'm sorry to show up like this. My name's Anna." I knew Evelyn. The world seemed to still around me. "You knew her?" She nodded, clutching the parcel tighter. "I worked with her. At the foundation." I motioned for her to come in, my pulse quickening. She stepped inside, her gaze flicking around the apartment. "She asked me to give this to you," Anna said, placing the parcel on the table. "She told me that if she couldn't deliver it herself, I should find you." I stared at it, plain wrapping, sealed neatly with tape, no markings. "What do you mean, if she couldn't deliver it?" I asked slowly. Anna bit her lip. "She passed away, Mr. Collins." The words hit harder than I could have ever imagined. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room tilted, sounds dulled. My throat tightened as I gripped the edge of the table. "No," I whispered. "That can't be right. I saw her just last week." Anna nodded sadly. I know. It was sudden. A car accident, 2 days after she left for the conference. Silence. The kind that feels alive. I sat down. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. She was gone. Truly gone. All those years apart, and when we'd finally found some peace, some fragile bridge between us, fate had torn it down again. Anna's voice trembled. She spoke of you often. Said you were the one person who ever really understood her. My eyes burned. Did she say anything else? Anna shook her head. Just that you'd know what to do with this. She gestured to the parcel, then quietly excused herself, leaving me alone once more. The moment the door closed, I broke. I don't remember how long I sat there, head in my hands, tears slipping down. The world felt smaller now, emptier. Finally, when I could breathe again, I reached for the parcel. My hands shook as I peeled away the paper. Inside was a wooden box, old but polished. Her initials were carved on the top. Inside the box was a single envelope. For Daniel, the last letter. Her handwriting again, steady, graceful, unflinching. I opened it with trembling fingers. Daniel, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say goodbye properly. And I'm sorry. You deserve better than letters and silence. But then again, that's always been my way, hiding my heart in words instead of saying them aloud. You once told me that love doesn't always ask to stay. Sometimes it just leaves pieces of itself behind, in small, quiet ways. I didn't understand that then, but I do now. Every place I've been, every person I've met, some part of me was still walking beside you. When we met again, I saw what I'd lost, and what you'd found. Strength. The kind of stillness that used to terrify me. You grew in all the ways I never did. And yet, you never stopped looking at me as if I could still be whole. That dinner wasn't just closure, Daniel. It was a promise to remember, not regret. To let go with love, not bitterness. Inside this box are some things I wanted you to have. They're small, maybe even meaningless to anyone else. But to me, they were pieces of the life we almost had. The first is the photo we took by the river. You were wearing that awful hat, and I was pretending to hate it. I kept it in my wallet for years. The second is the pendant you gave me on our second anniversary. I never wore it after I left. I didn't feel worthy of it. But I want you to have it back now. And the third, well, you'll find it in the bottom of the box. It's my journal. I wrote everything in there, the truth I never spoke. Maybe you'll understand me better through those pages than I ever allowed you to in person. If this really is goodbye, please don't carry guilt for what we lost. Some stories aren't meant to end with forever. Some are meant to teach us what love is, so we can live it better the next time. You were my beginning, Daniel. And in some way, you'll always be my home. Evelyn. I set the letter down and opened the box again. There they were, exactly as she said. The faded photo, edges curled but still warm with memory. Her pendant, a silver heart with a tiny scratch on the side from when I dropped it years ago. And the journal. Its leather cover was worn, soft from years of use. I opened it slowly, careful not to tear the pages. Her handwriting filled every line, messy at times, rushed, alive. It wasn't just words, it was her voice, her laughter, her fears, her love. I read for hours. Through sunset, through nightfall, until the candles melted into puddles and the room grew dim. She had written about the night we first met, about the small fights, the moments of silence, the things she'd wanted to say but couldn't. She'd written about leaving, and about regretting it every single day. And near the end, one entry stood out. If I ever find the courage to face him again, I won't ask for forgiveness. I'll ask for understanding, because I think he's the only person who could ever give it to me. That line broke something open inside me. Understanding, not forgiveness. She never wanted to erase the past, she wanted to make peace with it. By the time I closed the journal, dawn was breaking. Light streamed through the window, golden and soft, touching the photo, the pendant, the letter. I took a deep breath. Somehow, I didn't feel empty anymore. She was gone, but she'd left me something that wouldn't fade. For truth, her memory, her love, wrapped not in promises, but in acceptance. I placed the journal back in the box, sealed it gently, and whispered, "Goodbye, Evelyn." Outside, the city stirred awake. Cars honked, birds sang, the world moved forward once again. And for the first time in years, I was ready to move with it. The morning after I finished Evelyn's journal, the world felt different. The sunlight seemed softer, warmer somehow, as if it were touching everything with gentleness I hadn't noticed before. Maybe grief does that. It sharpens your senses, forces you to notice the beauty that pain used to hide. Her words were still echoing in my head. "You were my beginning, Daniel." I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired. I made a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the city wake up. People walked their dogs, cars hummed down the street, a child laughed somewhere in the distance. Life was moving forward, just as she'd said it would. And so should I. That's when I knew what I had to do. The journal mentioned her hometown, a small coastal village she used to talk about endlessly when we were young. It was the place she went when she needed to breathe, to think. She'd written that she wanted her ashes scattered there, where the sea met the cliffs. I booked a train ticket that same morning. The journey took hours. The landscape outside the window shifted from gray city blocks to rolling fields to the faint glimmer of ocean in the distance. I carried the wooden box with me, carefully wrapped in the same paper she'd used. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. When I finally arrived, the air smelled like salt and pine. The village was quiet, a handful of cottages and a single main road winding down toward the shore. I hadn't been there in years, but it looked almost exactly as she'd described, timeless, untouched. An elderly woman was sweeping the porch of a small inn near the docks. I approached her. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Do you know where I might find Evelyn Moore's resting place?" The woman paused, resting on her broom. Her eyes softened. "Ah, Evelyn. Such a sweet soul." "Yes, her memorial's up by the cliff path, near the lighthouse. You can't miss it." I thanked her and began the slow walk uphill, the wind tugging at my coat. The path was narrow and lined with wildflowers. The higher I climbed, the stronger the sound of the sea grew, waves crashing against rocks, fierce and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of something eternal. When I reached the top, I saw it. A simple stone marker stood facing the ocean. Her name was carved into it. Evelyn Moore, 1986 to 2024. Some stories never end. They simply change form. My throat tightened. I knelt beside the stone, tracing the letters with my fingers. The wind carried the faint scent of lavender, the same she used to wear. For a moment, it felt as if she were standing beside me, quiet and smiling, watching the sea. "I got your letter," I whispered. "And your journal. You always did find a way to have the last word." I laughed softly, but it came out choked. "I thought about what you said," I continued. "About understanding, not forgiveness. I think I finally get it now. You didn't want to be perfect, you just wanted to be seen." I opened the box. Inside lay the photo, the pendant, and her letters. I placed the pendant on the stone. The heart-shaped charm gleamed faintly in the sunlight. Then I took out the photo, the one of us by the river. We were both smiling, younger, full of plans that never quite happened. I set it down gently beside the pendant. The wind picked up, carrying the photo slightly toward the edge of the cliff. I reached out, caught it, and laughed again through tears. "Not yet," I said softly. "I'm not ready to let go." I sat there for a long time, just listening to the waves, to the wind, to the silence that wasn't really silence at all. It was filled with her, in a way that words could never capture. Then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed something unusual near the base of the stone. A small tin box, half buried beneath the grass. I frowned and reached for it. Inside was a folded note, sealed in a plastic sleeve to protect it from the rain. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was her handwriting. "Daniel, if you found this, it means you came. I had a feeling you would. I asked Anna to leave this here for you. I wanted to give you one last thing, my goodbye in person, even if I couldn't be there. I know you'll probably be angry that I didn't tell you how bad things had gotten. The doctors said it was just fatigue at first. By the time I knew it was serious, I didn't want to make you worry. You'd already carried so much because of me. But please, don't remember me as sick or broken. Remember me here, by the sea, free, where the world feels wide and endless. This was always my place of peace. And now it's where I'll stay. If you ever need to talk to me, come here. I'll listen. The wind carries more than you think. Goodbye, my dearest. Thank you for being my beginning, and for letting me be part of your story, even when I didn't deserve it. With love always, Evelyn." By the time I finished reading, my tears had blurred the words. I folded the note carefully, placed it back inside the tin, and set it beneath the stone again. The wind howled softly, and for a moment, it really did feel like she was listening. I closed my eyes and spoke, not caring that no one else could hear. "I forgive you, Evelyn, for leaving, for everything. And I hope, wherever you are, you've forgiven me too." A seagull cried overhead, and a beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, landing squarely on the stone. It was fleeting, but it was enough. I stayed there until dusk, watching the horizon turn gold, then crimson, then deep blue. When the first stars appeared, I finally stood. Before leaving, I took one last look at her resting place. The pendant shimmered faintly against the gray stone, catching the last light of the day. "Goodbye," I whispered, this time for real. As I walked back down the hill, the sound of the sea followed me, endless, steady, alive. The train ride home was quiet. The world outside the window slipped by in streaks of shadow and color. I held the empty wooden box on my lap. It felt lighter now. Back at my apartment, I placed the box on the shelf beside her letters and the photo I'd kept. For a long time, I just stood there looking at it. And then, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling sadness, I felt gratitude. For the love we had. For the lessons it gave me. For the closure that had taken so many years to find. That night, I slept with the window open. The wind moved through the curtains, gentle and cool, carrying with it the faintest trace of salt and lavender. And in that half-dreaming space between waking and sleep, I thought I heard her voice, soft, distant, but certain. "Good night, Daniel." I smiled. "Good night, Evelyn." The world outside kept turning, and for the first time in a very long time, I let it carry me forward. In the end, life doesn't always give us the closure we hope for. Sometimes, the goodbye we never say becomes the loudest echo in our hearts. But through pain comes strength, and through forgiveness comes peace. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional and mysterious life stories. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the stories we almost never tell.